Thank you for staying with us, and that's where we are at this point in time. We have here in the studio Dr. Tokpe Fashua, economist, public policy scholar, and former presidential candidate in Nigeria's 2019 elections. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Okay, Dr. Fashua, so the acting CBN governor is quoted as saying that hiking the interest rates has made a lot of difference in moderating the rate of inflation, and from 18.5 to 18.75. So please help us here. Simple, basic economics. The interest rates are going up. How's that going to moderate the inflation rate?
Thank you very much, Nota. The conventional economics and orthodox economics says that's the way it should be. If you want to control inflation, increase interest rates. That's meant to slow down people going to borrow money from banks in order to establish new businesses or expand their business. You remember now, that's about shrinking the economy. And then it also means people packing more money in the banks because the rates are higher. So people are not encouraged to go and borrow and all of that. However, you know, I do have a big issue with this orthodoxy, because obviously a lot of the economics of Adam Smith up to David Ricardo and all of those guys, and then the neoclassicals and so on, seem not to be working in places like Nigeria, because the context in which they were written are different. Of course, again, there's a pushback against the what they call heterodoxy in terms of, you know, what else can we think about to help ourselves? Apparently, we've moved up, you know, this same monetary policy rate from 13% in the last maybe 1 year or a year and a half or thereabouts, you know, to 18.75 now. What have we seen? Interest rates keeps increasing. So that means that there's a disconnect between the CBN rates and inflation, and it's not working quite the way they said it will. Remember, there's also a statement that the acting central bank governor made. He said that, well, given the fact that the numbers they have had from MBS is a moderate increase in inflation from 22.41% to 22.79%, therefore, they could increase, you know, the MPR a bit by 25 basis points. So we're moving from 18.5 to 18.75. Not quite the 50 basis point leap that we've been seeing in the last few occasions. And therefore, I would say that, you know, between me and you, the increases in interest rates are not working for us. And again, there's a way you increase interest rates, you're going to precipitate a recession in an economy, because you're shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And we're at a very, very momentous period of time that we need to be thinking exactly what are we trying to achieve. Given also the fact that the new government has promised increases
in salaries.
Not only, even in GDP. You know, we promised a double digit or something close to double digit growth in the economy. First of all, devaluation actually slashes your GDP. So the devaluation we have done almost has shrunk. We may be lucky not to drop to maybe the second or third largest economy in Africa. Because the devaluation, of course, your GDP is stated in terms of dollars. And of course, so one day if you say, listen, the value of my GDP, which is in Naira, converted to the dollar, is now half. So you're taking your GDP from 500 billion or 450 billion, where it was, to about 300 billion.
Well, some
people like countries like Egypt are powering on. South Africa is also not slowing down.
Some people will say, well, it's a temporary setback, given, you know, some of the measures that have been introduced in recent times, the removal of fuel subsidy, the fact that, you know, citizens now are paying the full cost of petrol. But nevertheless, it also has an impact on the economy and the cost of living, and also what happens to inflation. Of course, maybe more importantly, the float of the Naira, or if you like, the devaluation. I mean, you look at it as devaluation. Some people say it's the float.
De facto, on ground.
Whatever happens, the thing is, right now, there is no official rate for you to buy the dollar. It has gone up, so to speak. This is currently where we are. Some people say we're in an oxymoronic situation, whereby, you know, it's an oxymoron of sorts. The value for money is depreciating, cost of living is going up. And as a result, people need more money to be able to, you know, meet up with the cost of living. And government is saying, oh, we're going to see how we can do that. Just yesterday, the government of Ogun State released its own plan to see how it is that it can assuage the not the feelings now, but the conditions of living, of living in Ogun State. And they say we're going to add 10,000 naira to the salary of every worker and every pensioner, which is more money. Being in circulation, and then this is going to happen for 3 months while we work on, you know, providing transportation and converting all our buses to compressed natural gas, etc., etc. And we see, taken from that, you know, looking at the agreement that all of NEC has agreed, I mean, that this is going to be implemented through the states, we can expect to see more of that within the economy. It's one of the things that Labour is also agitating for. So this is currently where we are, that more money is going to be pumped into the economy. Yes, as an economist, are you going to say that, oh, government, since you're trying to mop up funds, no, that's not a very bright idea to put more money in the hands of people who are already feeling hard done by the measures that government has increased so far, has put in place so far?
Thank you very much. You remember that recently there was a step down of the 8,000 naira per month for 12 million families that the government had proposed, you know. And of course, the whole idea was, for me, thinking through that process, I was like, look, what do Nigerians need the most? The poorest of the poor. Do they need more cash to go and spend? To spend on what? If you're not increasing the production base of the economy and you're putting money in people's pockets, you're basically just driving up inflation. And inflation is said to be man's worst enemy. Even though in an economy like ours, you know, look, the problem you're going to have is if you're not growing and inflation is growing, the economy is tanking. So if you want, in an economy like ours, we may manage some level of inflation, maybe middle, you know, 15% thereabout, but the economy must be growing much faster, 8%, 10%. Everything you have to do to make sure the economy grows. So the state governors are doing what they need to do because of they're just trying to take away the bite from that hunger and the distress that people are going through. So Ogun State has added 10,000 naira. You know, someone may say, how much is that? But okay, fine. But again, mind you, they can only do that for pensioners who have worked and earned salary over time, and people who are still working. But this is a largely informal economy. I mean, all those women in the market and all of that, and people who are hustling, the laborers, the plumbers, and so on, how are they going to survive? Who's going to give them the extra? So, of course, the state has to do what they have to do. And I like the fact that, of course, the states are stepping up now to say, this is not just a federal government affair. A place like Bauchi, they put some buses out, maybe they want to take people for free. Indeed, these are some of the things that needed to have come a lot earlier. It looked as if we didn't actually think around these issues before rolling out those policies. And then you mentioned the floating of the currency. Ordinarily speaking, I want that if you are going to deregulate the market, let that sink for a while before floating the currency or devaluing the currency, because de facto what it is devaluation. Now, it used to be 461. There was an arbitrage, 461 to 770. And then we said, okay, you know what? We want to unify the rate. I said, ordinarily speaking, I would have suggested that they waited to see how people get used to this issue of 500 and... how much was it before? 547 in Abuja, 500 in Lagos and co. However, you know, we had to move with that again. Now, policy sequencing is very, very important. And you have to also look at the ability of your people who are usually in distress, who are in long-term poverty situations and so on, long-term economic downturn, to look at their ability to be able to cope with some of this. Because what that does is that, you know, we have now had to increase fuel price again. Now, so, and of course, I understand that on the streets, the Naira is now trading at around maybe 860 or thereabout, you know. And so, for how long are we going to have to do that again to increase fuel prices? And the moment you keep increasing fuel prices, that also goes into the cost of every other good. So there's a point at which you have to backstop it. These orthodox policies, we have to be very careful how we adopt them, we have to look at several other variables that pertain to our economy and our people before forging ahead.
You said
I remember also, lastly, Emakwe, that the Labour guys are asking for 200,000 minimum wage.
And federal government's actually thinking about it.
And in fact, I've also heard they're thinking about it.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, give me a break. The point is, look, how does the private sector cope with that? How many private sector entities can pay 200,000 naira to the cleaner? I mean, that's the minimum, or the gardener.
This is a bigger picture. I mean, that is, of course, going to be a part of the larger conversation. Yes. But then, you know, some people have said, oh, there are ways around it. I mean, for instance, you know, government doesn't have to give all of that money in cash. It can provide housing. It can, because you've talked about how if you're putting money directly in people's hands and there is no production to support it, exactly. what you're actually doing is just driving up inflation.
It wouldn't be a bad idea if government could provide houses. But again, we have to start thinking in terms of inequality, because are we saying that anybody that works for government is so lucky and everybody else should just find their level, anything they can do and so on? If the government is providing housing for... How many people does government employ? Actually, the public service, the civil service is less than 100,000.
Yeah, but right now, we know that...
it to the public service under the federal government, about 2.1 million people. None of the states employ 100,000 people. None, not even Lagos State.
Yeah, but...
Okay, so you have to be careful how you do that.
If we know that houses have already been built, we know that not all of the houses that government has built has been occupied.
The government hasn't actually built enough. Most of the unoccupied buildings are private sector driven. Unfortunately for us, when we had the opportunity, okay, what we were doing, when you go to Nigeria, go to places like even Kenya, Nairobi and co, even Morocco, Casablanca and co, some of the places I've been. When you come to Nigeria, what you see is that our housing policy is driven by so much selfishness. We're not thinking collective. But you know what, Mark, what's going on now and the huge arguments that are going on now is also an opportunity for us to recalibrate this economy. And I like the fact that people are speaking, people are resisting, and the hardship that has been kind of, that people are going through is good impetus for people to think and voice out, and government to also think. So now we have to think collective, all right? So, but we must quickly take the argument away from public sector. Okay. To say that, listen, remember, this is an informal economy. Most of the economy, that means that most of the economy is in the private sector. Okay. How does the private sector survive with this kind of thing?
I understand my colleagues have a question or two for you.
Yes, thank you, Mark. It's interesting, you know, to follow the conversation. Mr. Fashua, it's also unmistakable that the acting CBN governor noted that Nigerians should be patient, that the exchange rate will stabilize in the long term. I wonder what his optimism is hinged on if we're not doing the right things to encourage that, i.e. importation, especially when you consider that the import bill in the last quarter or the quarter before this year is still as high as 5 trillion naira.
No, well, the central bank can only take positions on monetary policy. Honestly speaking, I would have said that we've used most of our monetary policy bullets. In fact, the suspended central bank governor is basically accused, you know, by people who speak about, you know, going into heterodox policy, delving into fiscal policy and so on, which is not actually peculiar to Nigeria anyway, because every time there's an economic issue like that, from what I've read, you know, international economics, central banks tend to go into all of those places. You know, but Keynes made that popular statement, you know, in the long run, we're all dead. And I think that the government we can do a lot better in terms of managing this situation. See, there's nothing wrong in admitting your vulnerability in order to take a leadership position. To say that, listen, rather than just telling people, be patient, we are coming, be patient, we are coming, I think that we have got to the point now where we must actually show the people what we have in store for them. So we want collective thinking, okay, and it's good that the states have actually started stepping up. But we want to see action in the area of transportation across the board, in the area of food production and distribution across the board. I wrote an article about food distribution. They have several programs in places like India, places like Brazil, places like the US, which is even the headquarters of capitalism in the world. We can do a lot. But rather than putting cash in the pockets of people, government can actually purchase food from our farmers and use that to kind of
I'm actually
incentivize
I'm looking forward to that,
sector
Dr. Fashua.
and integrate the local
because
government.
we're not talking about this particular issue of agriculture for the first time. It's been on for eons. If memory serves me right, almost 40 years we've been talking about that. But that's not where I want to go. I'll quickly speak to one of these issues that the acting governor of CBN raised when he talked about exchange rates. He said, and I quote, in response to a question by the press there, "We're not trying to unify the rate. We believe that we need to encourage the market to be efficient, and that takes a bit of time. Some of the volatility you've seen over the period have been driven by that. The market needs to find its level, and also the reality that there's pent-up demand, which current supply may not be sufficient for." How do you respond to that? Because the opinion a number of people had was that, okay, the federal government is now unifying the rates, but here is the CBN governor saying, no, that's not what we are doing. We're doing something different.
Oh my, it's just incredible. But we really, really have to be careful about the management of the economy and the management of the people. Honestly speaking, I'll say that Nigerian people have gone through so much already, okay? And for those of us who are lucky, we have to also acknowledge our luck. Most people don't even know what to do with themselves right now. And so, I mean, of course, all of those grammar was being bandied, want to unify the rate. The thing is that a rate can never be unified. I kept saying that and letting our people know that you can't, in any economy, you can't have a single rate. But a lot of guys in the financial market push that idea of unifying the rate. And of course, if you are going to move the official to go and meet the black market rate, I call it black market. People say, don't call it black. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't call it black market. It's an illegal market. If we are going to have to keep doing that, the point is that you have to look at what is driving that market, because otherwise you find yourself having to use the official, the legal market, pursuing the illegal market ad infinitum. It's a dog chasing his tail. So now the central bank governor is the acting governor is making it clear that, listen, we're not actually trying to unify. We just want to create a market rate. That's great. However, what we have also seen, and this is by way of feedback to the central bank governor in the last few days, is that a lot of people are also complaining that they cannot get many of their transactions done through the banks. And they're having to revert. Even I've heard even Manufacturers Association and people like that saying that they're having to revert to the black market. What took us here in the first place is, where manufacturers and retailers and so on and importers will tell you that they can't access the official market because of this margin. They have to run to the black market, and therefore they have to add more money to the prices of their goods, and that has been driving up inflation. If the central bank is going to actually make this statement, they have to assure us that they have to explain to the public that in every circumstance, if they needed money and all of that, they can always approach the official market, which the governor said, listen, we can't even begin to describe it as I&E anymore. It's not investors and exporters anymore. It's something much broader, somewhere that people can walk to. People need that assurance. But my understanding in the last few days is that there's been hiccups in approaching that market itself, and there are so many transactions that are not being met in that market, making people to revert. And that's why you can see that maybe unofficial rate or black market rate is talking about maybe 860, which some people said they've quoted up to 1,000. It's a scary situation, so we cannot continue to feed that market.
Dr. Fashua, whether we want to feed that market or not, the market is there. The black and the white markets are both there.
Indeed.
And since the rates are almost uniform, I understand even the commercial banks are matching the rates of the black market.
I understand that commercial banks are going to the black market to fulfill. Look,
so at the end of the day,
we have to be very, very transparent about what we're trying to do.
As we try to wind down now, what exactly do we do? You talked about increasing the productivity level in order to even manage the inflation rate, as the acting CBN governor said. So what do we do? I tried to scribble some things here. From my layman's economics knowledge, cost of production, or the things that are required for production, land, money, power, personnel, those are basic things. But Nigeria as it is, to expand the Nigerian economy, to bring in the investors we need, what should we be doing now?
Number one, okay, I can tell you like 10 things anyway. Number one, Nigerians need to take their minds off the central bank. Okay. The central bank itself should reposition itself from being the key driver of this economy. We've done that under Emefiele. It hasn't worked. Okay, so let's move away from that. You know, let's move away from this pushing all of this orthodoxy to say that, oh, let us go and do what is inside the textbook because the textbook says this is the way to work. What I will say is this: we also need a plan. We also need a plan. The government of the day must bring out a master plan to say, this is where we're going. That seems not to have happened, to say, okay, this is where we're going with all of this. Painful reforms, very painful reforms, but hey, this is the light at the end of the tunnel. 1, 2, 3, 4, chess game. We make this move, that move comes, and all of that, we get somewhere. What I would, lastly, the last thing I'll say is this. I'll say that let's understand who we are. We're still a largely agrarian economy. If our people are poor, what can we do with the agricultural sector? Though, you know, I mean, Ayo mentioned that earlier on. What can we do in the agricultural sector to incentivize that sector, to open up our rural areas, because that is where our next spurt of growth is. To say, okay, in the US they have it, food programs. They spend billions every year buying products from their farmers to distribute to deficit areas. And that way you're going to reduce poverty and all of that.
And he said,
you know, and that can work.
He said improve security.
And you know, the point is that we have billions of naira in post-harvest losses. Even poultry farmers said they can't sell their eggs at some point.
Yeah,
and this is a country where we suffer malnutrition.
Mr. Fashua, we really need to go.
We take it down from all of this highfalutin financial market discussion and keep it simple and grow our economy from the scratch. Thank you very much.
We'll talk about Fashua as an economist, public policy scholar, and former presidential candidate in Nigeria's 2019 elections. Thank you for coming in today. And that is the show, but just before we go, let's let you know that the Nigerian Bar Association actually did put out a statement concerning that matter at the Federal High Court in Ikoyi yesterday. And this bar condemns the despicable altercation which took place at the premises of the Federal High Court, Lagos, between operatives of the Department of State Services and officers of the Nigeria Correctional Service. Says, while it is difficult not to hold the leadership of the two federal government agencies directly responsible for the shameful and disgraceful conduct of its personnel, one cannot discount the possible overzealousness or excesses of the officers involved as being responsible for what we witnessed.
Well, they also talked about the MBA further condemning the brazen disrespect for the sanctity of the court premises, the courts, and the judicial processes remain the barometer by which the conduct of persons or agencies of government are gauged in assessing the rule of law. The MBA calls on the two agencies to take immediate disciplinary measures against the officers involved in this disgraceful conduct.
And with that, we say thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. I'm Neo Taigbe.
I'm Maope Ogunjoseph. Thank you.
I am Bukola Koka. Bye for now.
I'm looking forward to the last part of that conversation. Let's see whether or not there will be those disciplinary actions from those two agencies. I'm Ayo Makinde. Enjoy the rest of your day.